Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Brew Talk with Mr.Beer. My name is Robert, your host. I have a special guest host this week. It's not Zach, it's not Ashley. So we have Dr. Tim Cooper. He's the managing director of Cooper's Brewery. He's a fifth generation Cooper. He is chief brewer at the Brewer, and he is also the past president of the Institute of Brewing and Distilling, which is pretty awesome. So welcome.
Thank you, Robert.
No problem. So we thought it would be great to have Tim on to kind of talk a little bit about the Cooper's history, how the malt extract is made, and some of the unique things that they do at the brewery that we don't talk about a lot to our customers, and some good inside information for them to hear about. So we'll kick it off with kind of the first broad question: is why did Cooper's get into home brewing in general?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, Robert. We one of my predecessors, a former head brewer of Cooper's, was doing work back in the 70s on trying to preserve wort for the purposes of yeast propagation.
Okay.
And he found that milk was delivered to schools and other places in 20-litre plastic bags.
Okay.
So he started playing around with these 20-litre plastic bags and found that he could put sterile wort into these bags. And then he and his colleagues, including my father Bill Cooper and his first cousin Maxwell Cooper, they thought of the idea that perhaps these bags of wort, 20 litres of wort, could be used for home brewing.
Yeah.
Because only a few years prior to that, I think in about 1975, home brew had been made legal in Australia. So prior to that, you could not make anything at home more than 2% alcohol.
Yeah.
So from about 1977, they started selling, 77, 78, they started selling these 20-litre bags in a box, we called it a bag in a box, yeah. And then home brewers would buy the, from the grocery channel or from other retailers, these 20-litre bags, and then add the yeast, which was supplied. And then they would proceed from there.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so in actual fact, it became, I don't think the company realised how popular it had become.
Yeah.
And they were selling more and more of these 20-litre bag in a box. And it became quite a logistic exercise because these boxes would go into the supermarkets, for instance, and occasionally a bag might break and then make a huge mess on the floor. So in about 1984, 85, they started, the Cooper started experimenting with an evaporation plant to make the traditional cans that we're now familiar with.
Yeah.
And so from that time onwards, we were evaporating the wort to put them in the 1.7 kilogram cans.
That's pretty exciting. No, that's cool stuff. Yeah, it's an interesting story how something like that can lead to what it is today and everything that Cooper's does. So let's get into the general topic of kind of how the malt extract is made. I've touched on this before, but I think coming from Tim Cooper, it'd be a lot better.
Well, yes, thank you very much, Robert. We have always made the malt extract and the hop malt extract, which we also call wort concentrate. We make that as dedicated brews in the brew house. So, for instance, in our brew house at Regency Park, which we built in 2001, where we moved the brewery to in 2001, we, for instance, will do 8 brews a day. Okay. And 4 of those brews will be beer brews on average, and 4 brews will be extract brews. Okay. So either one form or other of malt extract, or they'll be hopped malt extract.
And sorry to cut you off, but that's one thing that people don't, is usually that wort that's split between the beer and the malt extract is the same wort.
Yes.
Yeah, so yes. They get basically the same thing in your malt extract can that you're using to brew within the brewery.
Yeah, the only difference will be that when we do a malt extract or a hop malt extract brew, obviously the hop malt extract we add hops in the kettle. When we do one of those brews that go to the evaporation plant, we'll try and make sure that the wort gravity is about 17 Plato.
Okay.
So it's reasonably high.
Yeah.
Whereas the beer brews will be whatever the gravity we need to produce the alcohol. Absolutely, as you say, Robert. So from the point of, the brew house, we have 2 mash tuns, a mash filter, kettle and a whirlpool. So the average brew is 10.5 tons of malt going into the brew. From the point of the heat exchanger where we chill the wort down in the brew house, the wort will either go off to the lager, what we call the lager cellar, where we have the fermenters for fermentation to become beer, or it will go off to the evaporation plant where we evaporate the wort to make the malt extract or the hot malt extract. So I'm often asked, people often say, oh, it's just a byproduct of the brewing process when you're making beer. And I say, no, it's not a byproduct. Yeah. It's an actual product. It's an actual product. And we aim to make the malt extract, whichever variety, or the hot malt extract, specifically according to the quality parameters that we've determined for that particular product. So in terms of bitterness level and colour and so forth.
And stuff like that. So, and then one part we touched on it earlier, you mentioned it, the evaporator.
Yeah.
So I know that's something that Cooper's, they have one of the, I think, the better ones that you can do, and the method that they use, it seems to be really good results in a super high quality product. Yeah, well,
first of all, when we started experimenting back in the mid-80s, we had what we call a centrotherm, so Alpha Laval centrotherm. We had 2 of those, and even when we moved from Leabrook, where we were for 120 years, to Regency Park, we brought both of the centrotherms down to Regency Park, and both of those machines work under effectively a full vacuum and evaporate the wort at about 70 degrees. Now we have still from Alpha Laval an evaporation plant which consists of a series of heat exchangers, but the vapour from evaporating the wort is then used to heat up the next effect in the evaporation system. Okay, so it's a very efficient process, and also it's in the same way as the centrotherm, it's a very low temperature evaporation. So that's with the specific purpose of trying to retain as much as possible the flavours.
And the integrity of the actual wort.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So, and then from there, basically, it goes off to the canning line, correct?
Yes, indeed. Yes,
the canning line gets packaged.
Yes,
sent out for people to brew.
Yeah. We can do 44-gallon drums, and pails of hot malt extract, and of course the cans.
The cans. No, that's cool. So then one thing that we want to dive into is a little bit about the sustainability, some stuff that you guys do with the brewery. So we talked about the evaporator, so the water actually comes out of that. Yes. You guys use that for another purpose in the brewery.
Yeah, well, we collect the water, and we've got 2 tanks, 2 50,000 litre tanks, and we collect the water from the evaporation plant and then use that for irrigation of our lawns. Yeah. Because we have quite a lot of, fortunately we've still got quite a lot of lawn. We originally had about 4 hectares or 10 acres of lawn. Oh, wow. We've got a little less now because we built a malting plant back in 2017. So a little less lawn than there was. But yeah, exactly as you say, Robert, we keep the water from the evaporation plant and use it for irrigation.
I skipped a topic earlier because I'm excited about the water, but so you mentioned the malting plant. So you guys are using all your own maltings, all your own stuff now for everything that's coming out of the brewery.
Yeah, indeed. We originally did have a ownership of a maltings up until 2002, but we sold that to help raise funds for building the new brewery, or to pay down debt from building the new brewery. But we always had the hope and the intent with the land that we had at Regency Park to be able to build our own maltings again. So finally we did that in 2017, and we commissioned at the end of that year and the beginning of 2018. So we can make was built with the help of a European company called Brewer, which is the world-renowned manufacturer of malting plants.
Okay.
So all the specialised stainless steel equipment comes from Brewer, and it's a very, from the point of view of hygiene and process control, it's the most advanced plant you can get for producing malt. So we're very proud of it. Each batch is, we put 180 tonnes of barley into each batch. So we do a batch every day. And it's a 6-day process. So we have steepings one day, 4 days germination, and 1 day cooling. Doug Stewart, Dr. Doug Stewart, who's our maltings manager, he came up with a system of pre-wetting the barley, so that gets rid of anything. There's often microorganisms on the surface of the barley. They're washed, to a large degree washed away, which helps then the barley get off to a good start in terms of germination. So that pre-wetting, there's a pre-wetting screw before the steeps, and the moisture content goes from about 10% up to 25%. So as I say, it gets the barley in a good condition for the steeps, which then reduces steeping time, and the hope that eventually we might be able to get down to just having one steep instead of 2 steeps in that first day. So that would save further water. But it helps the barley in, as I say, in terms of the performance of germination. And the other nice thing that we have is that we have some spare energy that we can talk about, which we use in our cooling process, and that's makes for a very good energy efficient process.
I know. So we'll skip one thing and jump back to it, so we can talk about the energy. So you guys have a cogen power plant on site. 'Cause I know that you guys had. I can't remember if it was Scottish or a few years ago. You guys had power outages in Adelaide, but the brewery was the only place that still had power because you guys have your own power plant.
That's right. The whole state blacked out in September 2016, and we saw a flicker of the light. And I asked one of our engineers who was going by. I said, "Are we in island mode?" And island mode means where we've cut ourselves off from the grid. And he said, "Well, why do you say?" And I said, "Oh, I saw a flicker of the light." And he said, "Well, you shouldn't see a flicker of the light." But anyway, we did. And he went away and checked, and we were in island mode, which meant that we'd cut ourselves off from the grid. And this was about 4:15 in the afternoon. And then 6:30, I kept on working on my computer. And then I went home at 6:30, and as I was driving home, I said to my wife, I rang her up and I said, "There are no lights on anywhere, and all the traffic lights are off as well." And she said, "Well, you've been working in blissful ignorance in the brewery, not knowing that the whole state is blacked out, and it's just the brewery that's still operating because we've got our own cogen plant."
So you guys use a lot of the power from that. You kind of could save and recycle some energy use and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Well, we use, roughly speaking, about half of it's a 4.4 megawatt gas turbine, and we use about half the electricity from that plant. We made the decision back in the early 2000s to get that plant for energy security, which is paid off. And as I say, we use about half the power from the grid, and then half the power for ourselves, and the other half of the power goes into the grid. But the beauty of the cogen plant or cogeneration plant is that the waste heat from the gas turbine is then used to make steam, and that steam is the steam that we use in the brew house and the evaporation plant. So you end up getting about a 75% energy use efficiency as a result of using the thermal energy of the gas for generating electricity and generating steam, compared to about 30% for a conventional power station. So that's quite quite good.
Yeah. So let's jump into the water. So the brewery pulls water from aquifers below it,
Yeah.
but not drinkable water
Yeah.
as it stands.
No, it's quite salty.
Yeah.
It's about 1/10 seawater, but it comes from 200 metres underground, and they say these aquifers are fed from, way to the northern part of the country. There's the Great Artesian Basin, but often, as in our case, the water is quite salty, so it has to go through reverse osmosis. So we pull it up from 200 metres underground, goes through reverse osmosis, and we use about 70%, so you end up with pure water. We use about 70%, and the other 30% is what we call retentate, and we pump that out to the sea, or the intertidal zone to the north of us. So we had to build a 7-kilometre pipeline underground to then pump the retentate out to the sea.
And so, and then the majority of the water you're using is from that. You're not pulling water from the actual water system that's built in.
No, that's right. So the reticulated, we don't. I mean, a little bit for the building in terms of bathrooms and so forth is coming from the reticulated town supply, but the rest for the brewing process, it all comes from.
It's just run on its own as an own little island.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we got the energy, we got the water.
You get all the beer you need. So.
As long as we don't run out of gas.
Yes, that's true. So I think we've covered all the main points. I think one thing that I wanted to mention, because Cooper's has been doing this for such a long time, that you guys are the biggest producer of hop malt extract for homebrewing products in the world.
Yeah, and that seems to have been the case really probably, certainly from the beginning of the 1990s. We had a number of competitors in the UK and also in the US, but we got to a peak in the 90s of doing about 5,500 tonnes of hopped malt extract. In addition, we've done up to about another 3,000 tonnes of malt extract as well. But our nearest competitor, as we understand, is about a third of our size. So it's been quite a nice thing to say over the years that we're the biggest in the world in terms of making hot malt extract. And partly that's because there are so many enthusiastic home brewers in Australia. The tax on beer is very high in Australia, and people often get into home brewing for economic reasons because they want to save the money because the beer is too expensive. But once they start doing that, then they get interested in the process, and it becomes a hobby.
Become true hobbyists.
So, but we love talking about beer and homebrew, and we're glad that so many people feel so passionate about the process, and it's always a pleasure to be able to talk about how we do it back in Regency Park in Adelaide.
No, it's cool. It's great for our customers to hear about all that too, because we kind of always talk about it, but it's good to hear it coming from a Cooper. So if anyone wants to see pictures of the brewery, the maltings plant, they can find it on the Cooper's website. I think it's coopers.com.au. Since we're in the US, you can get to there from there. If you wanted to try any Cooper's beers, you can find them at Total Wine & More and a few specialty shops throughout the country. They usually do like the sparkling ale and
stout.
And the stout is the two you'll find, which are a really good ones. So if you're interested in trying that, because they're bottle conditioned beers, which is really cool. They're really unique style of beers. We get them for Christmas every year, and we love them. So.
Got to make sure we keep sending them.
Yes, so we go through a few cases in the office pretty easily.
And Robert, I didn't actually fully end up explaining that with that cogeneration plant, because we can produce more steam than we need in the brew house and the evaporation plant. When we built the maltings, we asked Brewer for their advice, and with the help of other engineers, we designed a system that in the kiln, not only is there recycling of the energy from the kiln in terms of the vented air from the kiln, but the incoming air bypasses that vented air and then goes through another set of heat exchangers, which are fed with hot water, and that hot water is coming from the steam from our cogen plant. So that saves about 40% of the energy in the kiln.
Cool.
So that's an extra bonus, and it's using steam that we otherwise wouldn't have a purpose for.
For. No, it's really cool. Yeah, if you guys want to see pictures, the malting plant is on Cooper's website. It's pictures of the brewery, all kinds of stuff. If you find yourself in Australia, do the brewery tour.
Yes. Come and see us.
Yes, and come and see them. It's quite a fun thing. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, comment, subscribe, wherever platform you are watching it. We appreciate it, guys, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks, Tim, for being on.
Oh, no. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.